On your mark, get set, go. We just covered a quadratic. What does a quadratic look like? Yep, a squared. What does that look like? A parabola. Do you know what that looks like? No, you don't. So when you don't know what it looks like, you have to go to a number line test. So let's just take an example. Caitlin, give me a number. 5. She chooses 5. Watch what happens if we plug in 5. What is 5 minus 2? 3 times what's 5 minus 4? 1 divided by what's 5 plus 3? 8. So she would get 3 over 8. Is that less than 0? No. So it looks like the number 5 did not work. Somebody think of a number that they think might work? Negative 2? All right. Negative 2 minus 2 is negative 4. Negative 2 minus 4 is negative 6. And negative 2 plus 3 is 1. So that gives me 24 over 1. That's 24. Is that less than 0? No. So negative 2 doesn't work either, does it? It would be really difficult to be able to find all the numbers that work and don't work. Give me a number, Rachel. 1. Let's plug in 1. What is 1 minus 2? Negative 1. What's 1 minus 4? Negative 3. What's 1 plus 3? 4. So you get negative 1 times negative 3 is 3, right? Divided by 4 is 3/4. Is 3/4 less than 0? No. So it looks like 1 does not work either. We're trying to figure out what numbers work and what numbers don't work. Notice how challenging inequalities can be. We're going to make them easy. And I'm going to show you how to make them really easy. We're wondering where this thing is less than 0. So I'm going to look for where any of the factors are equal to 0. What number would you plug in to make 0 there? 2. How about here? 4. How about here? I will take those and I will plot them on a number line. And I'm going to put those numbers above the number line. My smartboard is angry with me at the moment. What I'm going to do to help me in my work, you can see we're plugging in all those things up there, right? And we're trying to see what we come up with. I'm going to build a table that can help me organize my work. A table has rows and columns. The number of columns is 1 more than the numbers that I plotted up here. So how many numbers have I plotted up here? So the number of columns will be 4. So I'm going to make 4 columns. I like to connect it to the graph. And the number of rows is the same as the number of factors that you have. So we plotted 3 numbers, so I'm going to have 3 rows. Yep. So the numbers that give you 0 go on the top. The factors go on the side. Now, I told Rachel to pick a number, I told other people to pick a number, and you were just picking random numbers, right? Now we're going to be specific about our approach. Sophie, can you give me a number to the left of negative 3? Good. She chooses negative 5. I don't want to choose negative 3 because negative 3 is just going to give me 0. Everybody agreed? So we're going to choose a number to the left of negative 3. And she chose negative 5. You can choose whatever number you want. And what we're going to do is we're going to plug it into these. It's the same thing as using it up there. This just helps me organize my work. negative 5 minus 2 is, and I don't care whether it's negative 7 or negative 14 or negative a billion, I just care that it's negative. Yep. Negative 5 minus 4. Negative 5 plus 3. Now, what that tells us is if you would have plugged negative 5 in up here, you would have had a negative times a negative divided by a negative. And if you have 3 negatives, will the result be positive or negative? It will be negative. Now we choose a number that sits between negative 3 and 2. What's a great number that sits between negative 3 and 2? 0. 0 minus 2, negative. 0 minus 4, 0 plus 3. 2 negatives and a positive make positive. I pick a number between 2 and 4. 3. 3 minus 2, positive. 3 minus 4 is negative. 3 plus 3 is positive. Yep, that result is negative. Pick a number to the right of 4, 5. They are all going to be positive. So, am I wondering where this is positive, or am I wondering where it's negative? I'm wondering where it's negative. I'm wondering where it's less than 0. This graph shows me that it's negative here, and then it's negative here. It's negative between 2 and 4, and it's negative to that side of negative 3. That's what it tells me. So my solution set is as follows. Negative infinity to negative 3, union 2 to 4. How could I check my answer? You sure could. And if you plug in any of those values that sit in there, you're going to find that they are all less than 0. If you plug in any values outside of that solution set, you're going to find out that they're greater than 0. So instead of picking random values to test, we tested very specific ones that sit between those. And that's what works for us. Good job. We try a little bit more challenging. What's different about the next one? Yep, they're not all in parentheses. I got an equal sign here. I have a negative. I don't like to deal with negatives at all in these situations, so I get rid of them. What do I do to get rid of a negative? Yep, multiply or divide through by a negative. And when you do, what will you have to do? Flip the sign. So I have a 3x. I have an x minus 5. I have an x plus 2. I have a 3x minus 10. And that should all be less than or equal to 0. We okay? All right. What numbers give you 0? 0, 5, -2, 10/3, which is like 3.3 repeating. Agreed? 3 1/3. Okay, so I'm going to put those on my number line. Make sure you put them in order. So the least value would be -2, and then 0, then 10/3, then 5. So how many columns will I have? You're going to have 4, 5 columns. Which one is it? 5. It's one more than the number of factors that you have. And then you would have 4 rows. What goes on the side?
Number that makes it
Not just the numbers, but the actual factors. 3x, x minus 5, x plus 2, 3x minus 10. So, what do I do now? Pick a number to the left of, which would be Sure, negative 3. 3 times negative 3? Negative. Negative 3 minus 5? Negative 3 plus 2. And 3 times negative 3, this one will be negative as well. 4 negatives. If it equals 0, that means that you plugged in one of these numbers. So for example, sometimes people say it came up with 0 because they plugged in 5. Can't plug in 5. Got to plug in a number between 3 and 1/3 and 5 or after 5. Can't plug in those. Get it? Try to finish off the table on your own. Go. When you're done, your eyes can glance up. Is that what other people are getting? So if you notice, 4 negatives make a positive, 3 negatives make a negative, and this will be positive, negative, and positive. Do you notice how it seems to alternate every time? That is not always the situation. It is most of the time, but it's not all of the time. So do make sure you check. Don't just get a positive and automatically write negative, positive, negative, positive. Yes? So the idea here is that if we plugged in, say, the number 1, you would get a positive 3 times a negative 4 divided by a positive 3 times a negative 7. So the idea is you're multiplying and dividing positives and negatives. So if you were to multiply 3 negatives and 1 positive, would the result come out positive or negative? Negative. If it's an odd number of negatives, it's negative. If it's an even number of negatives, it will be positive. Does that make sense? Yes. Yep. Sir.
So then when it comes to making, like figuring out, so what if negative 2 to 0?
Right. Let's look at that then, okay? So we're wondering where this is less than or equal to 0. So are you wondering where it's positive or where it's negative?
Negative.
So then we're looking at this region and we're looking at that region, right? Yeah. Now here's where we have one small issue right here, okay? See the bracket, okay? So everybody wants to write negative 2 to 0 union 10/3 to 5. And so if you did this work on the test, I would give you all the credit except I have to take off a half a point. And here's just the one last thing that kind of messes people up that I just want to show you. This equal sign does mean that we use brackets, except what number are you not allowed to have in the denominator? 0. What numbers would give you 0 in the denominator? Negative 2 and 10/3. So they can't be part of our solution set. So negative 2 and 10/3, they can't have a bracket. They need to have a parenthesis. Can't have 0 on the denominator. Negative 2 would give you 0 on the denominator, so you can't include those. See what I'm saying? Okay. See that? You guys are good to go then. Let's do these last two. So what do you notice is different about letter E? Yeah, it's not greater than or equal to 0, and that's a problem. We want to set it greater than or equal to 0 so we can just focus on positives and negatives. So what are we going to have to do with that 2? Subtract it over. So 4x over 2x plus 3 minus 2 over 1 is greater than or equal to 0. Now, I have fractions, so if I have these fractions, how do I combine them together? Common denominators. So I'm going to multiply the top and bottom by 2x plus 3. Great. So in the top you have 4x minus what? 4x?
Minus.
Is it minus 6 or plus 6? Minus 6. All over 2x plus 3. Greater than or equal to 0. Does that simplify? What do we get?
Just -6 over 2x.
Yeah, just -6 over 2x plus 3 is greater than or equal to 0. I said that I don't like negatives. So what do you want to do? Multiply by a negative, and we get 6 over 2x plus 3 is less than or equal to 0. We good there? Now you understand why we spent some time adding and subtracting fractions so we could get to that point. Is the top ever equal to 0? No. Is the bottom ever equal to 0?
Yeah.
Yeah, what value could you plug in for x to get 0?
3 over 2.
Not 3 over 2, but 2x plus 3 is equal to 0. We subtract the 3, we get 2x is equal to -3. We divide by 2, x is -3/2. We okay with that? Okay, so the only number that we have to put on our number line is -2/3, or -3/2, excuse me. So if we only have one number in the top, how many columns are we going to have? We're just going to have 2. And how many rows are you going to have? Just 1. Okay, 6 didn't produce any zeros, did it? So you don't have to include it. You only have to include the 2x plus 3. So 2x plus 3 goes here. What number would you like to plug in?
2.
Sure, let's plug in -2, because this is like -1.5. So if we plug in -2, 2 times -2 plus 3, that's negative. What's a great number to the right of -3/2 you could plug in? 0, which is obviously positive. See how we like to use the number 0 for our benefit? So obviously, since we just have 1, this is negative and that's positive. Are you looking for where it's positive or are you looking for where it's negative? Why? Because it says, is it less or equal to 0? You got to go from what you used to set up your table, not the original, okay? So you want to write less or, so you say from here that way because it's negative. So you'd say -infinity to -3/2. Can I include the 3/2? No, so I have to use a parenthesis there. Can't use the bracket even if there's an equal sign. See that? Okay, last one. Yes, subtract the 3x on over. X over x plus 1 minus 3x over 1 is less than 0. Now what? Common denominator of x plus 1. Excellent. What do you have in the top now? X minus 3x squared minus 3x all over x plus 1. Excellent job is less than 0. We're getting closer here. What are you going to write that as? A -3x squared? X minus 3x is -2x. Over x plus 1, less than 0. Sure, I don't like the negatives. So we will do that in a second, thank you. Before that, let's just multiply through by a -1 to change these negative signs. Question? You could take out a positive x, you could take out a negative x, multiple opportunities. The fact is that I'm going to avoid the issue of whether we take out a positive or negative by just getting rid of that negative right away. So as I multiply this by -1, that becomes a positive 3x squared. That becomes a positive 2x over x plus 1. And that would be then greater than 0. So now what people are saying is we want to write this in factored form. And so you can then factor out a x times 3x plus 2 over x plus 1 is greater than 0. So, as we pause, can everybody see what we have here? And what we started with is I started with you in factored form. So that way you could just focus on the table. See what I'm saying? So I've tried to build you to that point. So what we want to be able to do is handle these kind of problems. So how many numbers do I plot on my number line? And what are they?
0, -1, -2.
I got a -1, I've got a -2/3, and I've got a 0. And I chose this example because those numbers are all actually pretty close together, aren't they? Yeah. And so that will help us understand how to choose numbers appropriately. What size, how many columns do I have? You do have 4, okay? I've got 4, and how many rows? 3. So I've got an x, I have a 3x plus 2, and I have an x plus 1. What now? Sure, -2 would be fine. That would give me a negative. Also gives me a negative and a negative. So therefore, 3 negatives will produce a negative. Now, what's interesting here, I have a -1 and I have a -2/3. And sometimes people really struggle to figure out exactly what kind of number to pick. That's about a -0.67. So give me an option. So that's what everybody says. -1/2 actually falls in here, doesn't it? Yeah, it's like -3/4. So here's a number that I like in this situation, -0.9. I like -0.9. That would be negative there. What's 3 times -0.9? -2.7 plus 2 is negative. And -0.9 plus 1. That'll be positive. So that will produce a positive set. As we look between -0.7 and 0, and some people say, choose 0.5 or -0.5, I think -0.1 is a great number to choose. I really like -0.1 in this situation, and you can see if you agree with that statement here in a second. I plug in there, I get a negative. What is 3 times -0.1? -0.3 plus 2. That will give me a positive. You see how we don't even have to do the calculation. We just have to determine positive or negative. And then -0.1 plus 1 is, and that will give me a negative. And if you plug in any positive value, you can see that you get positives all the way down. Are we looking for positive or negative? Positive because of this. You can see by our graph that the positives occur here and that they occur here. Do we have to worry about any equal signs? So no brackets are needed in any situation at all. We have from -1 to -2/3, union 0 to infinity. So, I most likely will not deduct a point there. I don't think you'll forget it. Okay, so this 1.7 worksheet, it's called nonlinear inequalities. Anytime you have something that's not linear, meaning it's not x to the first power, and you might say, well, this is x to the first power. Not when it's written in a fraction like that. It's not x to the first power anymore, okay? So when you have that, you have to make a table like we did. Now, you have a full day in class tomorrow. We'll start with a checkpoint, and then you'll have the rest of the hour to work on this. So you have 2 options. You can either come to class and start this from scratch, or you can try to get a couple of them out of the way so you can ask questions on the ones that you're struggling with. Now, who has activities tonight? Okay, If you have activities, good for you. Go do them. Enjoy them. That's why I'm giving you tomorrow in class. You understand?